Remember, comparison's the thief of joy. So this whole endeavor of committing yourself to something physically hard should be for you. When I was a little kid, my family decided that it was a good idea to go and hike the high Sierras. And backpacking is no easy task by all means. You literally load everything that you need for a few days and hike it up a mountain. At the time that they decided to do this, I was not in the best shape. This is when Fat Brett was at his prime. And it's something that I just kind of agreed to and was like, yeah, I'll go backpack the high Sierras. Why not? And pretty much like I was looking forward to it. Like the days leading up to it, my family and I, we all, put our gear out. We had our food. We were like loading up on snacks for the trail and all this stuff. And my dad, he grew up actually hiking those same mountains just as a kid. And he would tell me stories about like all the awesome things that they would see. And, they'd use chili mac as their food source. And apparently back then it was terrible. So they'd like toss it at some rocks and it would stick there for days. But anyway, so he would tell me all these stories about like these great lakes up there, these beautiful trees. And I was excited. I was ready to go. And I didn't know how hard it was going to be. So I'm about 11 years old, right? I don't really do anything active at this time in my life. And all I do is play video games, drink soda, and load up on Cheetos. The best. I miss those days sometimes. But to that point, we drove to California and decided, we're going to hike up these mountains. And so we had a pretty decent sized group of people with us at the time. And when we were starting off on our journey, we were in like a pretty flat place, right? I think my pack weighed about 35 pounds. So it's a good ratio for how much I weighed at the time. But we're in a flat field and we're walking along these beautiful, just gigantic mountains. If you haven't seen the High Sierras, you should look them up because it's like something out of a fairy tale, if I'm being honest here. It's just gorgeous. It looks like something out of a dreamland. And so you're walking in the scenery and just observing the beautiful mountains. There's like streams running through and it's gorgeous. The trees are there, everything. And it wasn't until we got to the base of the mountain where the trail started to increase. It started to go up. It was about like 5 p.m. at this time. And we were doing it in, I think, August or July. So later in the summer. And we started going up. The sun started to set. And it started getting a little challenging for me. It was hard. It was really difficult. My legs they weren't used to carrying a pack up a mountain and going full bore in that sense. But it was something I wasn't used to. It was something I wasn't ready to experience, I think. And the mountain got progressively higher. I think we had a total elevation gain on that trip, at least of like 7,500 feet. And so that's a lot to ask for someone that doesn't exercise or do anything like that. But the story gets worse. Like the night of, as we're hiking up this mountain, it started getting super dark. And back then we didn't have the best headlamps or flashlights or anything like that. So we were pretty much navigating this whole trail in the dark. And we could hear this just roaring river. And it sounded like someone was just unleashed a fire hydrant and let it go. But we could hear this thing to our side. And we were trying to find a place to camp. We couldn't. It was a challenge in that sense because it's pretty much just a trail, a canyon, and then to your right is the mountain. So you're just walking up this whole mountain, going pretty steep. And unfortunately, there was no place to camp. We couldn't set up our tents or do anything like that. So in my head at this time, I'm like, this is the worst. I don't know what my dad was talking about. This place sucks. Like I'm not having a good time. At first it was fun because I was able to see like the beautiful scenery. I was able to take it easy because it was flat. And now it's getting really hilly. It's getting scary. We can't sleep. And to our left is a roaring river. To our right is just a mountain. Anyways, the story gets worse. And we decided just like, because it was getting late in the night, we couldn't see anything. So we're like, I guess we'll just like sleep on the trail. And so we filled up our little mats with air, took out our sleeping bags, and camped out on the trail, like literally on the trail. And it was interesting. We all woke up, and literally, like, when we woke up, we looked to our left, and yep, sure enough, there was a river just flowing through, and it was powerful. So it was kind of scary. Like, we could have slipped and boom, you're gone. But we still had miles to go. And so in my head, I'm like, this is the worst. I don't want to do this anymore. And I remember I looked at my mom and I started like crying. I was freaking out. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Let's turn back. She's like, no, like, we got a few more miles to go. Let's just like stay strong. Let's keep going. And don't worry about, what you're scared about. I think it's good. And we kept on going up the trail, and in my head, I'm still hating my life because I'm like, this is not getting any better. I hate this. This is such a hard process of getting up this mountain. For what? Like, what am I going to see here? I've already seen the mountains. Like, where's the lake? I don't know. But we kept going up the trail, and I was fueling on trail mix and little gummies and little peach rings, whatever, to keep me going and keep my head up. And eventually, after a long period of time, we finally made it to the lake that we were hoping to get to. And when we got to the lake, there was a big downhill to get there. And so that was the best feeling in the entire world, was coming up across that crest and just seeing the lake, seeing it right there, and then realizing that you actually get to go downhill now. It was a great feeling. So we pretty much sprinted downhill. We set up our camps real fast. And then I started to understand what my dad was talking about. I realized that this place is absolutely gorgeous. And the only reason it stays gorgeous is because it's hard to get to. There's difficulty and there's challenge with that. And after that time, I had a great time in the mountains. We fished, we explored, we made forts. Pretty much everything you do as a little kid, I did it. And I was up there with my brothers and a group of other people. And so we had just a bunch of fun times together around a campfire and playing cards, doing everything that you do at a campsite, right? But it was worth it in the end. It was definitely worth it in the end. And I'm pretty sure I'll have to ask my mom on this, but by the time the trip was over, I was like, I don't want to go home. What's up with that? Like, I hiked up this entire mountain. I got my reward, and I want to stay. But we ended up going home. But there's a key element to that story that I've kind of taken into other aspects of my life. Since that point in my life where I learned that quick lesson, I've learned that you should always be actively looking to do hard things, especially things that are physically hard, because our lives are a little cushiony. And if you don't commit to something physically hard, you're missing out on an opportunity to grow. That trip forced me to grow. It forced me to step out of my comfort zone and really just embrace the challenge, which ultimately led to the result that I was not anticipating. I was not expecting me to love the mountains that much, but I did. And now every year we try and go back as a family, back to those same mountains, and do the same thing every day or every year, with the intent that, yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult getting up there. We're going to be sweaty. We'll probably be swearing, might slip, but that's okay. It's worth it in the end if you just keep going and you progress. And that's what I want to talk about today is committing yourself to doing something hard, especially as we move into the new year. This is something that I think should be on top of your mind. Now, hard is relative. I want to make that clear. So this could be your first 5K, or it could be an ultra marathon. It could be your first competition with, I don't know, bodybuilding, or maybe it's a swim competition, whatever that is. But no matter what, you should have the goal in mind that you're going to make next year the best one. No matter the challenge you choose, this isn't the time to compare your hard to someone else's. So for example, my brother this week he called me and he's like, hey, I'm running the Team Tim race in February, which I've mentioned before on this podcast, the Team Tim race is in honor of my wife's father who passed away from cancer. But it's a little half marathon we all do in honor of him, because his whole message was, hey, you can do hard things. Doesn't matter who you are, you could do hard things. And that was a lot of the things I talked about in the last podcast. And so this one's almost a follow-up to that podcast. But don't compare your hard to someone else's. So going back to my brother, he calls me and he's like, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to do it. And up until this point, my brother's always been like a power lifter, bodybuilder type guy, real bulky dude, not really aimed to run. And so him saying this is like, that's going to be a challenge for him, because he's going to have to, learn what it's like to start an endurance sport. And I'm freaking proud of him. But he's not comparing his hard to mine, or, it's relative. Like I said, like I'm training for a sub-3 marathon in February, which is that same race, but it's a marathon. But the only reason it's different from what he's doing is because, I've been training for this, and I've been running for over the past 2 years now. And so he's starting out. And so he can't compare where he's at to me, because that wouldn't be helpful for him. And it just would be a bad mental game. And so that's one thing I want to make very clear is when you define what your hard is or what your challenge is going to be, don't compare it to anyone else's thing that they're doing, because some people will already be so much further ahead of you that it'll be discouraging to look at them and say, dang it, how come I'm not as fast as that guy? Or how come I'm not as strong as this person in the gym? Or why can't I progress like this person at work? It doesn't matter, because hard is relative. It's the choice that you make, that you decide, okay, this is going to be a challenge that I want to do something difficult. So you're going to have to find the thing that's going to push your limits. What I want you to do is select it and then put a date on your calendar and commit to the work that's necessary to achieve your goals. Because you won't know until you try and then refine, and the results will come. So for example, let's take because I want this to be a physical goal that you try and accomplish and try and push yourself with. So let's say like you're running your first 5K. Well, okay, great. Either jump online and find like a race date and sign up there, or just say, okay, well, 2 months from now, I'm going to run my first 5K. Never done it. I'll train. I'll run a couple miles here and there. And then on Saturday, February 1st, or whatever the date is, I'm going to run it and I'm going to do it. So set a date to it, because that'll help you put a little fire under you and get you focused on that end goal of committing to whatever you're trying to accomplish. So set a date, pick a goal, and commit to achieving it. There's power in commitment. If you commit to doing something and during the process of whatever that challenge brings your way, then there's going to be so much joy that comes in the end of that. Now's the time to pursue something hard. So especially as we move into the new year, you want to get out of your comfort zone and step into a place of growth, I would say. The thing is that what differentiates a lot of people and why I want this to be physical is the type of growth that many people go their entire lives undiscovered, in my opinion, comes from physical activity. Because there's so many people who are capable of doing so much, but don't. And so here's like a quick blueprint to help with this. So first, I want you to commit to something. So choose something physically hard that you will work towards, and remember that hard is relative. And then confirm it. And what I mean by that is you need to write it down. You need to put it into existence. You need to talk about it. You need to tell your family, tell your friends, talk about it at work, just bring it up. But make sure that you look at that goal every single day. That way, you're always thinking about it, and it's always on top of your mind. You're like, oh yeah, I got that 5K I'm training for. Can't forget to go on my run. And then if you talk to your family and your friends about it, that's just going to help you stay accountable, which is hard to do nowadays, staying accountable. But it is important to speak about this stuff with other people. And I think, like I said, there's power in doing that, because then you're like, oh yeah, I told I told my best friend that I'm going to run this 5K. I don't want to disappoint them, or I don't want to go back to them and say, nah, it rolled around, but I wasn't really feeling it that day. I was a little sore, but maybe next year I'll do it. And so to that question, I say, okay, well, if not now, then when? If you're not going to do something hard now, when are you going to do it? Because life moves fast. I get that. I can see that all the time. There are things that you can accomplish, but it's never the right time, right? Like, oh man, I got this big project at work. I don't have time to train. Or, man, my family's got all these things that we're doing, and unfortunately, I can't go train. And things come up. They're going to come up. No matter who you are or what you're doing, whatever your job is, things come up all the time. Your life's going to get more complex. I wouldn't say complicated. I would say complex is the right word. And so you're going to have to figure out how you can tie in these different pieces of, training, family, work, faith, if you're a believer, all these different things. You have to tie them all together, right? And navigate that and still allocate enough time to each one to be balanced, because you never want to be out of balance. One of my mentors, his name's Bryce. He always explains his life as a triangle. So he says, he looks at his life as a triangle balanced on a pencil. And each corner of the triangle, or each point of the triangle, is a different aspect of his life. So point number 1 is his family. Point number 2 is his profession. And point number 3 is his faith. So he's a member of a church. And he says whenever one gets more time, the triangle gets out of balance, right? So he has to go back and readjust. And so he's always trying to delegate time to each aspect of his life that he's deemed important, so he can go and live in his own terms, like a joyous life, a successful life. And that's going to be the same story for you as you especially commit to a physical goal. And that's another reason why I want you to do this, is because you're going to have to identify what does that look like for you and realize it's not going to be easy to achieve. But here's the reason why I want it to be a physical goal rather than like I'm going to read every night, or I'm going to eat better, or I'm going to get, 5,000 followers on TikTok because I'm trying to blow up and be a content creator. Whatever that is. I don't know. I don't want it to be that. I want it to be physical. But the reason being is because that takes time. You have to dedicate time for it. So my challenge is you to embrace the idea that if it matters to you, you will make time. I'm going to say that again. If it matters to you, you will make time. And that's why there's power in commitment, because you say, hey, I'm going to do something. And then you have to figure out in your busy life, your busy schedule, where you can fit it in. It's almost like a puzzle, right? Look at your life as a puzzle. Where can you put the piece of physical challenge into it? Because you're going to learn a lot of lessons through that. But rule number 1 is to choose something physically hard that you're going to work tirelessly toward. So again, identify something that will challenge you and your unique ability levels, because everyone is different, but something that will require time and energy, and something that's not easily achieved by you, not by anyone else. Don't look at anyone else. Remember, comparison's the thief of joy. So this whole endeavor of committing yourself to something physically hard should be for you. And it might sound selfish, but you got to commit to go all in. And when you make this sacrifice, you will be stronger and ready for whatever next opportunity you have to prove yourself. And one thing that I'm doing, so I've talked a lot about my sub-3 marathon, and I'm sure you all are sick of hearing that. But one thing I'm doing is after I reach my sub-3 marathon, I'm immediately switching my training to, tackle my first ultra marathon that I signed up for in June. So I'm running the Bear Ears Ultra Marathon in Monticello, Utah. And here's why I signed up. Because it scares the hell out of me. A marathon is different because most of the time it's flat. Sometimes it's downhill. But it's pretty consistent. And this ultra marathon I'm running has 6,500 feet of elevation gain. It's 30.12 miles, I believe. And there's no one on the course. So I'm just going to be out on the trails. I'm going to be in the mountains, running my own pace here. Definitely not going to go sub 3. So there you go. But this is something that's new to me. And it's a challenge that I want to see through, because I've heard so many people talk about the benefits of, going and pushing yourself on the ultra level or whatever that is. But I've also seen in my own life, as I've I ran my first half marathon, incredible experience. I loved it. Like, the rush of achieving that was amazing. Running my first marathon was like 3 times that. And so I can't imagine what it's going to be like when I run my first ultra. Like, that is going to teach me so much about myself, because when you're in the pain cave, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn, okay, am I someone who can stick through something to the end? Am I someone who said that they're going to do something and commits to it and finishes it through? So that's why I'm doing an ultra marathon in June. I want to see if I can do it. I want to see who I am, and I want to see what I'm made of. But I'm sure this is true, because it's true for me. But I'm sure there have been many years before when you said you were going to accomplish a big goal, but life got in the way. This isn't another one of those times. I don't want it to be. So you need to identify what you want. You need to talk about it. You need to act on it and live your potential, because that's what this is going to show you, is you have more potential to do more and experience life more, right? So hold yourself accountable and make it real. Become obsessed with this goal, whatever that is for you. You can create reminders for your purpose, on why you want to do it. Like for me, it's like, I want to prove myself right. I want to see what I'm capable of. So you got to believe that you can do it. You got to get excited about it. I came up with a few strategies to help you with something like this, but the first one is visualization. And I learned this from my wife. She always visualizes things that she's about to do. So a good example of this is she has a flight coming up and she's running through all the exercises in her head. She's going to, go study materials, but she's pretty much just thinking about the scenarios that she could potentially go into and thinking about what her response would be. Same principle applies for you. If you're running a 5K for the first time, go out and run a couple miles, see how you feel, and then realize okay, well, I could do better here. I felt good here, or whatever that is. And then understand okay, I'll probably struggle a little bit in this. Here's how I'm going to confront that. I'm going to visualize myself reaching the end and succeeding. And that helps me, at least, just at a very brief moment, right? So the other thing to keep in mind is if that feels daunting to you, another technique is just break down the goal, break it into smaller steps. Because when you take something large and you break it into small chunks, it makes it a little bit more manageable and it makes it less daunting. And you can start to see in your head that, yes, actually, this is achievable. I can do this. I could do hard things. And that's one thing that I would suggest doing. So going back to the example of the 5K, because I think anyone can relate to this. It's okay, well, I've never run a 5K. So I'm going to run a mile and then another mile. And then maybe 2 days from now, I'll run 2 miles. And I'm just going to start progressing slowly until I feel comfortable enough to get to that 5K mark. So that's another thing to do. And on that same note, I would also suggest having some kind of tracking on this. So in my, I have a spiral notebook. It's super old school, but it's what I like to see, and it's how I visualize my progress. But I have a spiral notebook that has my week over week training for my sub 3 marathon. That way I can see okay, is my time increasing? Is my weekly mileage increasing? And I could start to see the progress. So if I ever feel discouraged, I'll go back 4 weeks in the book and say, dang, well, look, I was that far back 4 weeks ago, but look where I'm at now. I can keep going. I just got to stay consistent. So track it somehow. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You can just like keep a little note in your phone and just make comments when you start seeing some success. But another thing to think about too is like set up an easy reward system for yourself. So when you hit certain milestones, maybe you go run your first mile. How are you going to celebrate? Because you should. That's exciting that you're doing something that you've never done before. And so you should celebrate. You should get excited and be proud of yourself. Good example of this, going back to running. I'm sorry I keep bringing up this example. But on Saturday, I have an 18-mile run. And I'm not really looking forward to it. And got to be honest, I'm kind of nervous for it. That's a lot of miles. But rest assured, afterwards, I'm going to go and celebrate by, getting some good food, hanging out with my wife and having a party that way. Like, by all means, I'm not going to just go and sit on the couch. I'm going to go celebrate and say, you know what? You ran 18 miles today. Let's go. That's one step in the right direction to get you to sub 3. And that's a mindset I want you to have too, is like, okay, I just ran a mile. That's the next step for me to run a 5K. Hell yeah. And get proud of yourself. The other thing that I think is helpful is incorporating some form of habit building. And this doesn't have to be anything too intense, but integrating small related habits into your daily routine can support whatever larger goal that you have in front of you. So if it is a 5K, and one thing that you could do is like, if you realize you're spending a lot of time on Instagram, go follow some runners, see what kind of content they're posting. Maybe it'll be helpful to you. Or if you want to start, having some kind of habit of like tracking your progress, just set aside 10 minutes a night, reflect on where you're at, and write down where you want to be. Pretty simple. No one said that this is ever going to be easy, but I promise you it will be worth it. Because if you can identify the right hard for you, and you can choose it over the easy wrong every single day, and you stay consistent, you know you can do it. And now it's just time to prove yourself right. So stop waiting, figure out what you want to do. It's time to work. It's time to get after it. Getting after it is not just a phrase I say. Getting after it means progress. And anyone who listens to this podcast has that in them to progress and to get better, become a better human, and take some pride in what they're doing. Get excited about some things. Because I just want to reiterate that there is transformative power of committing to and achieving something challenging. So when you're going on your journey to achieve this hard physical goal of yours, it's often as valuable as the achievement itself. It fosters growth, it builds resilience, and this is where I would say the most value comes from. It gives you a deeper understanding of your own capabilities. And that's what I want you to remember. And that's why I'm kind of getting all fired up with this episode, because this is something that's important to me. Because understanding what you're capable of will show you that you can do so much more than you think. And you'll be getting after every other aspect of your life, because you'll realize, dang, I just proved that I can run a 5K. Maybe I can be a better husband, a mother, a person at work. I could push myself in these other aspects of my life because I just proved I did something that I never thought I could do 5 months ago. And that's what I want you to do. So after this podcast, if you do anything, I just want you to take some time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, to reflect on what could challenge you physically. And then write that goal down and set a date, and then progress towards it. Be unrelenting in your progress. Be unrelenting in your commitment. And don't let things get in the way. If you realize, I got to wake up an hour earlier to get some exercise in, you got to wake up an hour earlier to get some exercise in. Because if it matters to you, you will make time. And that's my message today. Committing yourself to something physical and something challenging will prove that you're made for more. and you're getting after it, baby. So thanks for everyone for listening to this episode of the podcast. I'm excited to see what people start doing. And if you want to tag me in your post, do hashtag getting after it. I'd love to see it. Tag me. I'll support you along the way. But let's all go do something hard. Let's challenge ourselves. And let's go into the new year feeling like a beast. Take care, everyone.